All right, let's get started. Thank you to everybody for joining us. My name is Kristen Reynolds. I'm the chair of the Food Studies program at the New School and the director of the Food and Social Justice Action Research Lab, and we're located in New York City. We want to invite everybody to drop your name and your affiliation or where you're joining from in the chat so we can all kind of get to know each other in that way. So this virtual webinar series explores how power inequities in food systems undermine sustainability and equity within the food system, focusing on who shapes power, who controls resources. And we argue throughout our work that when power is ignored, efforts to improve food system sustainability remain marginal. So in this series, we are exploring how to meaningfully transform food systems by confronting power directly. The series draws from a year-long collaboration led by today's speaker, Jose Luis Chicoma, while in residency in this project at the New Institute in Hamburg, Germany. The collaboration involved 8 scholars and practitioners who developed food policy recommendations to confront power across sectors of the food system, including agroecology, fisheries, seeds, affordable diets, and governance. So the 8 topics are covered in our webinar listed on the slide that you're seeing on your screen right now. Today's session focuses on supply chains, food for all, realizing the transformative power of traditional and informal food systems. The series overall, the 8-week series, is hosted by the organization Food and Planet, the Food and Social Justice Action Research Lab, and the Food Studies program at the New School, and the New Institute. Each session is also co-hosted by additional organizations and institutions. So today our session is co-hosted by Ricolto and World Wildlife Fund, all of whom are doing critical work on food and power in their own right. I also want to thank the events and communications staff at the New School, as well as Cedric Gottfried, who's a PhD candidate at the New School, helping us to run the webinar today. So I want to introduce our speakers, and then we will move into the presentation. Jose Luis Chicoma is a member of the high-level panel of experts on food systems, a former minister of production in Peru, and as I mentioned, he was the program chair of the Future of Food program at the New Institute that gave birth to this project. He's co-editor of that report with myself, and he will present today on food power inequities in food supply chains, corporate concentration, and importantly, the potential of traditional and informal supply chains in our food systems, which is always important and I think is getting an extra spotlight today in today's times with the situation in the Strait of Hormuz and the impact this is having on fuel and supply chains and impacting food and agriculture. So our commentators today then are the following: Errol Schweizer, who is with IPES Food and the checkout grocery update. He's an expert on public grocery stores to counter retail concentration and expand food access. Next, Charlotte Flichet from Good Food for Cities, Ricolto, who works with cities to strengthen traditional and public markets for equitable access to healthy diets. Then we have Michael Moulet, who will be joining us shortly, Senior Program Officer at WWF, who focuses on equity-driven supply chain strategies to improve access to food. And last but not least, Henri Manderson, who's with Food Systems C40, works on supporting cities in advancing traditional supply chains through local policy and action. And so as we move into the presentation portion of our webinar, we invite you to put any questions that you will have in the Q&A box so that we can see them, and we'll do our best to address questions toward the end of the session. Note that the session is being recorded and the video will be shared by YouTube at a later date. So I will now pass it over to Jose Luis.
Thank you so much, Christine. Just to set the stage about what we're covering here, when we talk about food supply chains, we're talking about everything that happens after production, processing, transport, transformation, distribution, retail. And I want to start with a basic premise that I'm sure that everybody would agree with, which is that food is essential. It sounds so obvious, so commonsensical. But if we look at how supply chains have evolved, that principle is not really there. What we see instead is that market forces have been allowed to define how food moves from producers to the people. And the outcome of these market forces defining this and designing this, the outcomes reflect profitability for shareholders far more than public need. And this is not new. Food has been commodified, turned into a commodity over centuries. There were moments when this process accelerated, driven by technological change, innovation, and political decisions. Many of those advances and progress on canning, on processing, on refrigeration have been fundamental to shape how many of us have access to food in a very positive way. But not necessarily everything is positive, and we'll see it here in the next few slides. Um, so what we have right now is the result of this long trajectory, and the result is not a simple dichotomy. It's clear that on one side we have these highly industrialized chains that are standardized, efficiency driven, that operate across long distances, and they tend to produce cheaper products, especially for a few commodities that are quite present in our diets. On the other side, mostly on the global south, we have traditional and informal systems, systems that are less visible in policy debates, but are central to how people actually access food, especially those with lower incomes in the global south. And these systems, the traditional and informal systems, also sustain more diverse diets and keep a wider range of foods in circulation. Most people, both in the global north, but mostly in the global south, use a mix of these ways to get their food. They move between them, between these different, between a range of hybrid ways between these systems, according to different factors like price, proximity, and daily constraints. So this is the overall context of the situation. But how did we get here, especially in the last few decades? And I want to point out to the power inequities that we have analyzed in in this report, The Elephant at the Table. And yes, over the past decades, we have seen that globalization and neoliberal adjustment reforms since the 80s and 90s mostly. These two factors, globalization and neoliberal adjustment reforms, have pushed strongly in one direction. The policies have favored export-oriented and industrialized supply chains, and this goes hand in hand with growing concentration across the system. Concentration, of course, on agricultural inputs, but on grain trade, on processing, on retail, and increasingly in other parts of the food systems like fisheries, aquaculture, finance, and one sector that is increasingly more important, which is digital platforms. So that's one of the power inequities, the context of globalization and reforms that led to higher corporate concentration, even though corporate concentration has been present also for decades before that. But this is reinforced by dominant narratives. The idea that these industrial systems represent the future, that scale and uniformity are signs of progress. There's this modernization and formalization fetish. And this fetish equates modernization with market mechanisms with progress. And in the meantime, as a result of that, actually, traditional and informal actors have been sidelined. They receive limited public investment, they're often absent from research agendas, and they are rarely at the center of policy design, even though in places like the country where I'm originally from Peru, for example, traditional food markets are key to ensure food access for 70% of the population. So, um, what can we do to confront these power inequities? And that's what we have done in this report. We have analyzed the power inequities that prevent a transformation for the good, and for the good meaning that ensures food that is sustainable, affordable, healthy for most people or for all people. We analyze these power inequities and we propose policy pathways to address these this situation. So in this case is how can we propose these policy pathways to realize the transformative potential of traditional and informal food systems? So this is like going back to our initial premise. How can we ensure that food is really essential? One of the main issues is, of course, reducing concentration, confronting concentration, confronting the predatory and abusive practices that come with concentration, ensuring more competition, and especially open space for different types of actors. This goes hand in hand with the second, which is like the first one, which is strengthening traditional and informal systems that should be a priority so we don't treat these systems as relics of the past, but as a core part of the food systems for the future. When I was Minister of Production in Peru, I prioritized with a group of public officials in the government. I prioritized traditional food markets. And at the beginning, like many people from other ministries and many important stakeholders, they told me, like, why are you doing this? Like, nobody had heard that traditional food markets were a priority, a political priority in decades, no? When they were built more than 100, in some cases more than 100 years ago, but also in the 50s of last century, they got a lot of attention. But since supermarketization came and supermarkets were seen as the future, the traditional and informal food markets were seen as something from the past. So I got that reaction from people from different ministries, from very important stakeholders who couldn't understand the importance that these markets had for food access, for inclusive job creation, for sustainability, for nutrition. No? So we had to fight the system. This shouldn't be like that. We should all be more aware of the importance that these markets have. So one of the priorities should be that. And I'm talking about mixing here, and you can read it in the report. We differentiate traditional and informal also. They have many similarities, but also the issue there is that informal activities, like informal, like street vending, or even like informal food selling in the like close to the traditional food markets, where you see many informal vendors, they face very restrictive and punitive regulations, not considering that millions of people depend not only on get their income here, but to get their food here through street vendors and informal food systems. So if we keep considering that formalization is the only way to move forward, we are basically ignoring the needs of millions of people for their livelihoods and for their food access. So this is what we propose, that we should change a very different approach towards these types of systems. Also, in the last few decades, also related with globalization and neoliberal adjustment reforms that I mentioned at the beginning, what we have is that there's a lot of resources that are invested for producers to export their products and to sell them to urban elite markets. So in the end, the best food well, in many cases is produced for these other markets, not for the local and territorial markets where we find the people that need those products the most. So what we're saying here is that many of these development policies, support for innovation, support for quality of the products, should be directed towards the markets that are the ones that need the most, the local and territorial markets. And one more thing that I want to mention is that in many cases, the food safety frameworks are very strict and are designed with industrial production in mind and not considering that traditional and informal food vendors, for example, can adapt easily to other types of food safety frameworks. I'm not saying that we should relax dramatically these food safety frameworks, but that we should adapt them to different contexts. Of course, for a public official, a public agency that is in charge of these food safety frameworks, it's better to say, let's be super strict with food safety, with no room for flexibility. But this is not this doesn't match reality. Again, here in Mexico City, where I'm speaking from, it would be impossible to ensure food access for the millions of people that come like from distant places from the city to work during the day. It would be impossible to ensure their food access if we are not more flexible with the food safety frameworks for the street food vendors, for example. So we should be more proactive in designing these frameworks that are still safe, that are more adapted to local to local conditions and informal conditions. No, so these are like four main areas that we're covering as policy pathways to change how supply chains work in the global. So there's a focus on the global south, but why we have the other panelists that are coming with different perspectives from the global north and also from the global south on what they are doing in their own fields of expertise and work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jose Luis, for bringing this focus on not only markets and supply chains, but also the importance of not only going through with kind of standardize and scaling up, which I think is so important when we're thinking about power dynamics. So next, we're going to move over to commentary from our panelists, and the first that we'll hear from is Errol Schweitzer.
My first commentary is that picture in Jose's presentation got my mouth watering. I don't know where that was, but I want to go and buy some of those tomatoes. So my name is Errol. I've been in the grocery industry at this point for about on and off 33 years. I helped open and manage a bunch of the Whole Foods markets in New York City. I was on the Austin Travis Food Policy Board for about a decade. Most of my work is in operations and supply chain, procurement, category management. So I've written a lot about pricing and corporate concentration as a justification for why we need public food. So I'm going to spend just a little bit of time getting a little more granular into the numbers of what the U.S. food industry, how it's actually set up. And if you're in New York, so I know New School's in my hometown. New York is an interesting and really unique place in that it's one of the least concentrated, most disaggregated grocery retail markets. It's mostly retail and wholesale cooperatives, independent businesses, obviously bodegas, greengrocers. New York is also interesting because it has also some of the countries and possibly the world's leading food policy. Food Forward Plan is something that we referenced a lot in Austin. Yet New York also has enormous food insecurity, has enormous wealth disparities, wealth inequality. And so there's a reason why I think we've put so much focus into New York, even though it's actually anomalous. So the rest of the US, Walmart and Kroger or Albertsons dominate the grocery industry. Walmart alone is close to 30 cents of every grocery dollar when you take into account Sam's Club. They're 1 to 3 ranking in almost every major metro market in the United States, except for New York, where you don't have any of them. You have like Key Food and Food Bazaar and some of the other local chains. So this is really interesting because these are also publicly traded companies. And particularly during the pandemic, we saw a huge influx of profits at retail, but also further back in the supply chain among manufacturers and food processors, particularly the big 4 meat companies, as well as the big packaged food companies that dominate the sales of pretty much every aisle in the grocery store. Even though you see a lot of different brands, the majority of sales in almost every major packaged food category is dominated by 3 or 4 companies. If it's like bread, it's Bimbo or Flour Foods. If it's soda, obviously Coke or Pepsi. If it's cereal, it's General Mills, Kellogg's, which is going through acquisitions, or Post. If it's chocolate, it's Hershey's or a couple others. So this is the structure of the grocery industry, and this market concentration enabled profiteering because they were able to set price and they were able to keep moving prices up as their costs came in, cost increases, particularly during the pandemic and supply chain issues, then the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And now we're going to see a whole other wave of it with Hormuz. It's happening. It's going to happen. They're already justifying it. And they're going to try to skim additional profit So they took costs. Those costs were real. They took higher retails to market, and the difference is they raked in these huge profits, and then they bragged about it on shareholder calls, on earnings calls. So it's all in the public record. You can go and look online. You can click on links in some of my old Forbes articles. I found it really hilarious, except for the fact that, within a few years, myself, like all of you, were paying 50% higher grocery prices than we were. And even higher in some categories where prices have gone up 60 or 70%. And so to me, and I've got a few more minutes left, I think we need a range of food policies to have a laser focus on affordability, essentially to make sure that people can afford food again. Food is too expensive. There's too much food insecurity. There's too much market power among the giants. I'm a big supporter of disaggregating, breaking up these big companies, actually enforcing Robinson, Patman, and other antitrust laws, Sherman antitrust, Clayton antitrust. There's some great stuff out there from ILSR and other scholars on this. They use this market power to raise prices. Walmart's deals with Pepsi in terms of undercutting other retailers, ensuring that Walmart had the lowest prices on PepsiCo products, which includes snacks and beverages, huge category. But also expanding consumer subsidies, expanding certain targeted retailer subsidies, which I've written about. And then in my last 2 minutes, let me talk about public grocers. And this is why this is so important. You need a backstop. You need a public option where folks can go, and you need a lever or a trigger in the supply chain that enables an outlet for producers that is not going through these large corporate supply chains, which are highly extractive, that have tons of different inside income streams, which peel value away from suppliers and funnel it up to shareholders. So in my mind, a public grocery sector, it's the public option. I'm not calling it a utility because that would imply a monopoly. And the best model, the only workable model out there, and I keep wanting to emphasize with everybody, is the U.S. military commissary system, known as in the grocery industry as DECA. In the grocery industry, everybody knows about it. DECA is known as its own channel, it's the military channel. Tons of brands that I know sell in, and this is how it works. Publicly funded operations. The overhead of all stores are covered by tax dollars. That means that they are not passing on retail markups to consumers. They have large-scale purchasing and wholesale. They have over 235 locations, and they serve over 8 million service members and their families, take up less than 0.2% of the total U.S. bloated military budget. So it's the only workable model, and this is something where I've written, for the Mamdani administration, advising Avi Lewis's campaign. If you want to look at public grocers, the only useful model is the commissary. It works. Tens of thousands of New Yorkers are familiar with the commissary. And so when people scare you with the specter of Bolshevism, you just have to let them know the U.S. military is actually to the left of the Mamdani administration, how these stores are set up, operated, and the fact that it's one of the most highly rated grocery chains in the country, that it's ranked above many regional and local and national grocery chains because it does two things well. Prices are low, carries what people want every day. And folks, it's among the highest reasons why people stay close to base after they leave the service. And so I've got a bunch of pieces about it, but I just want to say this. It's possible, it's viable, and it already exists. So ignore all the critics. It's mostly bad faith. And the ultimate reason for it is we need a backstop in the supply chain excuse me, that was my timer. My time is up. To impact positively, bring down food insecurity, but also you need another lever, something else in the supply chain as an outlet for suppliers and as a competitive leverage, not only to pay workers better, which I didn't even get into, but assuring that there's somewhere else for people to go besides the big corporate chains. So thank you so much for having me on here. Wonderful to be here with all of you folks.
Thank you so much, Errol, for including highlighting this narrative that the solutions that we might imagine are somehow further to the left than actually exist. I think that's a really important point to highlight. So next we're going to move on to Charlotte Sachet to speak, and after Charlotte will be Michael Mullet.
Great. Well, thank you so much, and congratulations to Jose Luis and the whole team for this report that I think was very much needed, even for us who work in this every day. So yeah, I work for Ricolto, we're an international NGO, and we basically partner up with municipalities and local actors to strengthen the role of traditional food markets, precisely because they're so important for food access and nutrition, also, as somebody put in the chat. So my intervention will focus more on how we're trying to operationalize some of the principles and the recommendations of the reports. And one message that actually particularly resonated with our experience was you cannot transform food systems through technical fixes alone. And especially one sentence in the report made me thick, which said, we were promised transformation, but instead we got pilot projects. And so actually at Ricoto, we're developing at the moment a more systemic approach to working with traditional markets. We call it food markets for all. And we have built it around 5 interlinked pillars, which we focus on to try to avoid this fragmentation. And I'll walk through them briefly with some examples. The first pillar is actually related to inclusive and accountable market governance. And one example comes from the city of Mbale in Uganda, where together with Food Rights Alliance and Consent, which is a consumer association, we support a good food parliament, which is a space where farmers and vendors and traders, city officials, researchers come together quarterly to address the issue of food safety in local markets. And those actors, they diagnose the problem together, they exchange, make recommendations, and it feeds into the planning processes within the municipality. And what was interesting is that this has had very concrete consequences on protecting, preserving, upgrading the local market infrastructure, prioritizing what the vendors requested, which was better working conditions, better sanitation, and couple this also with consumer awareness on food safety and nutrition, but also direct feedback into policy processes with an actual food safety ordinance, which has been drafted and is now waiting official approval. And I wanted to mention this because I think this is a quite a nice example of that it is actually possible to break the policy bias towards formal supply chains, which we see is often very much holding back investments in traditional food markets. Another example is also from Arusha, where we are supporting the Arusha Sustainable Food Systems platform, which is the city's equivalent to a local food policy council, where they've been hosting a dialogue between the city council and informal actors at one of the key markets in the city. It's called Quilombero, and where vendors were able to raise the concerns about sanitation infrastructure, drainage, food safety, etc. And yeah, has also resulted in some changes in how the city is actually addressing or actually investing in local markets. And importantly, one area of focus that is becoming more and more important is also the role of small and medium midstream actors, the so-called hidden middle, because they're often missing from discussions, but actually they're far from missing from the action. The key actors in local food supply chain and making sure that they're effective and delivering this accessible, affordable food to markets. The second pillar is related to adequate market infrastructure. And one thing that resonated with us from the report was that, contrary to common beliefs, informal infrastructure is not inherently inefficient, but in reality, many of the issues actually stem from lack of investments in those markets, basically those markets being neglected. And so I wanted to highlight a strong counterexample from the city of Ouagadougou, which is a winner actually of the 2025 Milan Pact Award. And there's part of a project called AfriFood Links. There's a group of civil society organization that's worked with the municipality to basically lead a co-design process for the rehabilitation of a local market called Nabi Yar, which is actually very important in terms of food security and nutrition in the city. And this process actively involved vendors, producers, municipal services, other actors, and resulted in investments being made in basic infrastructure improvements like water facilities, waste management facilities as well, shade, improved stalls for the vendors that are more comfortable and promote more food safety, solar powered cold rooms, etc. But what was interesting is that it didn't focus just on the infrastructure itself, but also combine this with training of informal street food vendors on hygiene and safe practices, really recognizing that they're contributing to food security in the city, not just selling them to go away, as we see in some other cities. Also sourcing from local agroecological producers on the city's green belt, which is also currently being rehabilitated, and also public awareness through murals and community events in the city. And yeah, obviously interesting results in terms of vendors' income and linkages with urban and peri-urban food producers. But what is interesting as well is that this process is contributing to creating this momentum for a more food systems approach in the way the city is working on food, and they're now discussing developing or creating a municipal food system department, which would be quite a change in how they govern the food system locally. So another example to say that yeah, we can also change the way that infrastructure investments are designed, not to replace local and informal food markets, but really to strengthen them. And then the third pillar, and I know that I'm running out of time, is related to fair and inclusive supply chains. And here I wanted to emphasize the importance of savings and loan groups that are embedded directly in market structure. So there we're working in the cities of Arusha in Tanzania, and Mbeya as well in Tanzania, where access to affordable finance is actually one of the main constraints for vendors, where a lot of the traders operate informally. And there we've seen that with support from the city council, we've been able also to support village saving loans associations, six of them, and we've seen that it has helped women vendors access hundreds of millions of Tanzanian shillings and funding, which can be used not only for trading but also for school fees, housing, stabilizing stocks during shortages, etc. And yeah, maybe the last example I wanted to mention is related to a participatory food safety system, also in Mbeya and Arusha, which is inspired by PGS in the organic world, but is a way to connect vendors and farmers directly to strengthen also safe food practices across the chain, and improving traceability, transparency, and also shows that it's possible to have shorter chains where intermediaries do not necessarily capture all the value and have undue power that is driving prices up for consumers and income down for producers. I think I won't be able to talk about the other pillars, but just to mention that, yeah, number four is about agency, knowledge, and generating demand so from consumers for healthy and safe food, and the fifth one is about safe and healthy food environments that provide healthy and affordable food. So just to close, I think for us, the main lesson that we've learned is that, it's not just about investing in infrastructure, but we really need to take a systems approach to these processes, really investing in the connectors, the facilitators, the local institutions, and the coalitions that are driving those changes. And that's really those relationships that are driving the change locally. And we're still early on, but we can see really encouraging results, for instance, with some of our partner municipalities that are now including this in the local development plans and specific resolutions. So I think, yeah, the power of the collective is really what is making this change happen. So that's it for now. And yeah, over to you.
Thank you so much. It's inspiring to hear about the ways that you are supporting this work on the ground, whether it's farmers or municipalities and other actors. So thank you very much. I want to remind everybody that if you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A box so that we can get to them at the end of the session. So next, I would like to pass it over to Michael Millet.
Hi there, just checking. Hi, Kristen. Thanks a lot. Thanks, of course, to Jose Luis, fellow panelist. Just checking you can hear me. Having a bit of technical issues today.
Yes, we can
Great.
hear you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Thanks again to the organizers. Thanks for bringing us together on this very important, critical question. I'm gonna change my script a little bit and start just reflecting on something that, of course, Errol mentioned. Military-owned supermarkets in the US. Just a personal story. My father back when went on a scholarship to the US, and when I was talking to him about this current debate around rebalancing commodity markets in the food systems. He actually mentioned that he used to buy groceries and clothes in those military-owned outlets. Some of the clothes, some of which I actually still wear today. So there, talk about sustainability. So we were invited to talk about how to confront power to transform food supply chains today, particularly for the informal sector. My answer will draw mostly from a recent report titled Sustainability Without Justice, which we've published in collaboration with the One Planet Network Sustainable Food Systems Program. Fellow panelist Charlotte has been a bit involved, so thanks, Charlotte. Straightforward, I'd like to say one key takeaway that helps answer today's question is this: we must stop treating equity as an outcome of transformation or something that we can achieve because of transformative policies or that we can add on while we do transformative policies. And instead, we should start treating it more as one of the key engines of transformation. Not the only one, but really one of the key engines. We need pro-equity policies in order to overcome resistance to the transition towards sustainability. Fellow panelists before me already alluded to this, but we really need to build a narrative around the fact that it is these pro-equity policies that can enable or unleash systemic transformation. It's a critical pathway. We need these, furthermore, I'd like to add, of course, powerful actors, unless we deliver these pro-equity policies. It will be powerful actors that will continue to have the ability that they currently have to just block further transformations, whether it's sustainable development or any other type of transformation. Because they can, because that's what power is. It allows to decide for other people's opportunities, other people's burdens, other people's benefits. For too long, our approach has been rather technocratic or focused on technical solutions instead of a political one. We focused on sustainable intensification, on efficiency, and these approaches have done some things, have had some good outcomes, but have caused or unleashed a whole other set of negative consequences, and have not resolved ultimately the problem that we face, which is triple planetary crisis and a civilizational crisis. The report that we developed, we took the cue from the World Health Organization and, of course, academics working on a relatively new framework, the so-called commercial determinants of health, which is not only applicable to human health but also to planetary health. When looking at supply chains through the lens of the commercial determinants of health, it helps us understand a set of mechanisms or practices through which profit-driven companies leverage, or that these profit-driven companies leverage, in order to pursue their business model and in order to pursue their tendency to infinite growth, to profit maximization. They do this in function of current laws, societal norms, and current social and environmental impacts. So, in a sense, companies can use these to just shape not just what we eat, but also shape how food is governed. The more power, of course, the higher capacity to influence these policies. Through this concentrated power, they extract value from producers at the bottom of the chain, externalize cost, so deliver or cause environmental impacts, and again, shape the rules through lobbying, regulatory capture, and so on. Done with the bad news, onto the good, some solutions. Our report looked at several case studies, and we're looking for equity-driven strategies that were aimed at rebalancing power. So I'd like to highlight three if I have the time. The first connects in a very straightforward way to the first panelist, to Errol. Public procurement. This is a no-brainer. It's a structural lever that we all know we also know countries, governments should be delivering. In the report, we looked at the case of Brazil, the National School Feeding Program, which mandates 30% of food for school meals to come from family farms, as well as some additional other criteria related to local sourcing and so forth. This is not charity. This is market creation. This is a market created with a key guiding principle, which is human rights. It helps guarantee stable demand for smallholder on one end, while delivering nutritious food, in Brazil's case, to up to 40 million children. The issue for Brazil here was, being that it's such a massive country with a magnificent diversity of indigenous groups, they needed to make school feeding programs culturally appropriate. So they did that through the creation of roundtables called catrapobos, which they started to create all across the country to adapt according to local supply chains, local ingredients, local gastronomy, and local dynamics. Wonderful work. The takeaway message here remains the shifts. This shifts power. This type of intervention in public procurement shifts power by creating an alternative to the concentrated supply chains that existed in the country. Second, and I'll be shorter on this one, is the thorny question of redistributive land governance. Our report looked at Scotland, who's been undergoing land reform legislation over quite a number of years, giving communities the right to buy and manage land, directly confronting not years but centuries of concentrated ownership, on the premise that without this equitable access to territory, to natural resources, no amount of supply chain innovation can deliver justice. Multiple challenges, of course, faced in this endeavor. It's been going on. New policies are tabled year to year because it is just a question that is very tricky to be resolved, even in a country like Scotland. Third case here that I'd like to mention, the third example, alludes to or focuses on the need for coherent policy packages and taxes, that magic word. In Colombia, with great effort from civil society groups, a set of aligned reforms were introduced. A new tax on sugary drinks and ultra-processed foods, alongside mandatory front-of-pack warning labels, an update to the public food procurement regulations in the country, also mandating minimum 30% from local producers, and a constitutional amendment on the right to food was also passed. These measures directly challenge the commercial practices that make unhealthy food cheap and healthy food expensive. What connects all of these examples that I've mentioned is that they all either redistribute or try to redistribute power, whether it's through legal mandates, participatory governance, fiscal policy. We were also, of course, invited. Today's webinar focuses, as mentioned and as covered by fellow panelists, and I'll start to close with this. I'm hoping I'm not running short on time. We were asked to say what confronting power means, in particular for traditional and informal supply chains, public markets, street vendors, cooperative networks. It was already mentioned also by fellow panelists. These systems already perform the function that we want, making diverse, nutritious food accessible, ideally sustainable food. They are these informal networks and supply chains. They are the diversity that is so critical to have in supply chains. We have examples in the report from Japan, the Seikatsu Club Cooperative, which built a member-governed supply chain that excludes ultra-processed foods and prioritizes local agroecological production. We also have a case in the Philippines, farmer-led seed network, which bypassed corporate control entirely. I'll just close by saying something that I alluded to at the beginning. This is not a technical issue. We all know that. It's a political choice. We need to find ways to make equity a political choice that cannot be avoided. That's where the challenge lays. Our report offers 9 concrete recommendations, strengthening regulation of corporate practices to prevent industry capture, legally recognize the right to food, establish binding quotas for public food procurement, so on and so forth. So I'll leave it at that. As we say at WWF, a future where people live in harmony with nature is only possible in a fair system. So thank you. I'll hand it back over to you, Kristen.
Great. Thank you so much. And we're getting a lot of support for your comment about equity being not only an outcome, but a strategy to make a more sustainable and, well, just, let's say, food system. So now we're going to pass to our final panelist, Henri Menderson.
Thanks so much, Kristen, and it's fantastic to be with you guys today and to be able to provide some commentary on this incredible report. And I am afraid, being last on the list, I'm going to echo a lot of what my fellow panelists have already said, but I'll try to maybe bring it into a bit of a framework that we've developed at C40 Cities. We are a mayoral network working across the globe with the world's 100 biggest cities, representing 25% of the global economy, supporting those cities to both mitigate and adapt to climate challenges. And I'll be commenting on how cities can promote traditional supply chains. So while cities may not control international trade laws or national agricultural subsidies, they possess significant local authority to disrupt power imbalances. And it's been mentioned before by fellow panelists, but they have immense purchasing power and so are uniquely positioned to leverage public procurement. And they often serve as the single largest food service provider in their jurisdiction through schools, hospitals, and social food programs. They also control public infrastructure and space. So municipalities manage the physical infrastructure of urban markets, and they have the authority to invest in sustainable upgrades such as cold storage, clean water, and sanitation. They can also redesign these spaces for inclusivity and for food safety, very importantly. And then they also have regulatory and licensing powers. They control vendor licensing and marketing regulations. So they have the authority to create permit systems that protect informal traders and establish food loss and waste minimization policies. And finally, recognizing that urban food systems rely on surrounding regions, cities have the authority to form strategic alliances and to co-create joint business support programs with neighboring municipalities, allowing them to influence peri-urban land and water management. So kind of with these authorities in mind, in 2025, C40 supported a working group of cities across Africa, Latin America, and Asia to co-create a political commitment called the Thriving Food Systems Accelerator. And it is a political framework that translates many of the systemic power shifting recommendations from the Elephant at the Table report into concrete municipal policies. It has 13 signatories, and they have committed to basically 4 targets by 2035. The first one is on establishing universal school meals that are aligned to the planetary health diet, so meeting food and nutrition needs within planetary boundaries, but that are also sourced from local and sustainable suppliers. The second one is to sustainably upgrade urban food markets to reduce food waste and improve food safety. Third commitment is to build these urban-rural alliances that support farmers and local small and medium enterprises to transition to more sustainable practices. And finally, to develop an integrated food system strategy that is aligned and integrated into their climate action plan, that's backed up by a budget, and also their disaster risk management mechanisms. So I'll just take a few moments to focus on each and explain how they can actually shift power. So through commitment 1, the school meal program becomes the anchor for local produce, and it's also an incentive to move to sustainable farming practices. And the city can inject essential, reliable demand into local economies, bypass concentrated corporate supply chains, and transfer economic power directly to local farmers and food small and medium enterprises. And we have the example of Sao Paulo. Michael also mentioned this work in Brazil, where now the national government actually mandates that 45% of food procured for the national school meal program needs to come from local family farmers. But Sao Paulo in 2024 invested almost 54% of its federal funds directly into purchasing from local family farms. And they are serving more than 460 million meals to school children annually. So it's huge. It's a huge demand that can actually support local producers. Then secondly, on sustainably upgrading food markets, the second commitment of the accelerator, it actually recognizes vendors and informal actors as key change agents that could work towards more resilient food systems. So rather than viewing informal markets as a problem to be eliminated in favor of supermarkets, they work with through inclusive processes with their market vendors and their informal vendors to upgrade these markets. And last year, C40 supported Lagos to do just that. They revived a biogas plant at the Corsi fruit market to divert organic waste from landfills. But they did this through an inclusive process where they integrated informal waste workers into the operations of the plant. And the power generated by this biogas plant actually then supplies lighting in the market and also refrigeration, which then again helps the vendors to cut down on food loss and waste. And it provides organic digestate, which is given to farmers to use to improve soil health and also improve crop yields. Thirdly, on the urban-rural alliances that cities have committed to establishing, it highlights the reciprocal nature between large metros, the demand side, and the surrounding municipalities, the supply side, and then drives the establishment of a governance mechanism to make sure that benefits flow both ways. The large metros commit to support smallholder farmers and local SMEs with training, incentives, and supply chain infrastructure, as well as the kind of guaranteed demand of the school meal program, and in so doing, de-risk the transition to more sustainable practices, whilst at the same time increasing the supply of diverse and sustainably produced food into the city. And Medellin's Comer initiative provides farmers with technical assistance and guaranteed urban market access, ensuring a stable, diverse food supply while directly supporting traditional producers who actually feed the city. And then finally, through Commitment 4, by integrating these initiatives into a formal citywide food strategy, municipalities can ensure that traditional and informal supply chains are legally recognized, celebrated even, adequately funded and protected in broader urban planning and disaster preparedness framework. So we just launched this political commitment at the end of last year in Rio at the C40 Mayoral Summit, and we're just kicking off. But because the mayors actually signed this political commitment, they need to report on it biannually and deliver on these targets by 2035. And that's it. I think I'm still within my 7 minutes, Kristen.
Thank you very much. One of the least pleasurable parts of running webinars is to remind people of their timing, but we are so interested to hear what you're talking about regarding connecting and helping cities see how to realistically move forward in more sustainable and equitable ways. So thank you so much for that. We're almost to the end of our time together, so we're going to pass it to Jose Luis for a few kind of final commentaries, and then back to myself. So Jose Luis.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you all for the very interesting remarks. I just wanted to make like a reflection about these issues. Like I mentioned, around 6 years ago, I was Minister of Production in Peru. I was promoting political agenda actually on traditional and informal food markets and supporting them for the first time in decades. We were looking for a global blueprint, guidelines, reports about how to do it better, how to invest in a more efficient way the public resources, how to mobilize organizations for public action. And then we turned to different organizations and different places in the world, and we didn't find almost anything. The situation has changed, and this is inspiring. Organizations that work with local governments and local organizations like Recolto and C40 have this issue very high up on their priorities. So that is completely different from a few years ago. WWF is prioritizing equity-driven strategies for food systems, which for a major international NGO that works with different stakeholders from all over the world is also unique or didn't happen like many years ago. And Errol is presenting a great idea that makes all the sense in the world about how the public sector should be more involved in ensuring food access for all. This is a change that where many of us working on food systems are usually very frustrated with all the challenges that we have and how most organizations are very shy in addressing those challenges. And after listening to many of you here, to all of you here, it's inspiring to see that is changing. So thank you all. I'm glad that we are having this conversation. As Christine mentioned at the beginning, I'm a member of the high-level panel of experts on food security and nutrition. We just published a document that is published every 5 years that defines some of the key issues that should be addressed in the upcoming years. It's called the Critical, Enduring, and Emerging Issues. At least two of the issues that we have identified, probably more, are related to what we talked about. Corporate concentration, which should be higher up in the agenda, and we are addressing it in this document from the high-level panel of experts, and also affordability of healthy diets. My invitation is for all of you, the attendant, the participants here, to participate in this open consultation. We're going to paste it here in the chat. Kristen just pasted that. So please participate in this open consultation. We need your feedback to make this document better and to influence the global food policy debate to address like new issues in a better way. So thank you all, and I hand it over to Kristen.
Thank you so much. And so I want to give another round of thank yous to all of our panelists for sharing your insights and really reflecting on the work that we have been doing with this report and hoping to move forward and how it can connect to multiple sectors working to make supply chains better. So thank you so much for joining us. And to the audience, we thank you for joining. And we have just put into the chat two links. One is the report, the link to the report, which you can download in PDF form. And the second is the link to register for any forthcoming sessions of our webinars, which are weekly on Wednesdays. Next week, April 29th, the speaker is Emma McDonald from the University of Tennessee, speaking about neglected and underutilized species. So please click on the link there and register for that or any of the forthcoming sessions. Thank you so much to everyone and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.